Hello everybody! In today's video I will show you step by step how to measure power on Apple Silicon. Don't just watch this, follow along. Run the same steps on your own machine. Because once you do, something becomes very clear. The numbers reported by tools like Power Metrics don't tell the full story. And this time you don't have to take my word for it. By the end of the video you will have verified it yourself. Let me show you the setup. In the top left, I'm running the experiments in Julia. This is where we launch our workload kernels, switching between CPU, GPU and AMX, while keeping everything else as consistent as possible. At the bottom left, I'm using mactop. This gives us Apple's internal energy model, CPU power, GPU power, DRAM power and total system DC power. It's a convenient way to get a first-order breakdown of where the energy is going. But we don't want to take that at face value, so in the middle I have a wall plug power meter. This measures the actual power drawn from the wall, independent of any model. It's our ground truth and it lets us sanity check what mactop is reporting. And on the right, TG Pro shows temperatures and fan speed so we can verify that the system is thermally stable and not throttling during the runs. To reproduce this demo, you will need to download Julia. And you will need to install mactop. The links are provided in the video description. Let's walk through what we're actually doing in this Julia demo. First, we import a few packages. We start with linear algebra, which gives us access to optimized matrix operations, including mul-bang, the function we'll use for matrix multiplication. Then, we load benchmark tools. This is important because it lets us measure performance in a controlled and statistically robust way. Instead of just timing a single run, it runs the kernel repeatedly and reports distributions, averages, and variance. Finally, we import matmul. This is Julia's interface to Apple's GPU stack, and it allows us to run computations directly on the GPU by working with matmul array. Next, we define the problem size. We set n equals 16,384, which creates very large matrices, large enough to fully utilize the GPU and generate a meaningful power signal. Then we allocate our data on the CPU. A and B are random float 32 matrices. C is an output matrix with the same shape. At this point, everything lives in regular system memory. To run on the GPU, we convert the matrices into matmul array. On Apple Silicon, the CPU and GPU share unified physical memory, so this is not a copy into separate VRAM. But Julia may still allocate new matmul managed buffers in that shared memory, which is why memory usage can increase. The key point is that after this conversion, mul-bang is dispatched through matmul and executed on the GPU. Finally, we can run the benchmark. This code will repeatedly perform matrix multiplication on the GPU for 30 seconds. If you focus your attention on the mactop window, you can see the GPU power ranging between 65 and 70 watts. The GPU power will slowly rise towards 183 watts. You can observe this even better in the power meter window, which visualizes the last 30 seconds worth of samples. The values here are higher because this is AC power before conversion to DC. The reason why the GPU power goes up is because the GPU cores are getting warmer, as you can observe in the TG Pro window on the right. As chip temperature increases, static power rises because transistors begin to leak more current. Ideally, when a transistor is off, it should block current completely. But in reality, there's always some leakage, and that leakage increases rapidly with temperature. At higher temperatures, electrons have more thermal energy, which makes it easier for them to cross the transistor's barriers even when it's supposed to be off. So more current flows unintentionally, and that energy is dissipated as heat. This creates a feedback loop. Higher temperature leads to more leakage, which increases power, which in turn raises temperature even further. That's why thermal management is so important, not just for performance, but also to keep static power under control. Now that we know how long one matrix multiplication takes, we can turn that into actual computational throughput. For matrix multiplication, the total number of floating point operations is approximately 2 times n cubed. So here, with n equals 16,384, we compute total flops equal 2 times n cubed, then divide by the runtime about 672 milliseconds, and convert to gigaflops per second. That's what this expression is doing. The 2e to the power minus 9 scales the result into gigaflops. And as we can see, the result is about 13,000 gigaflops per second, or 13 teraflops per second. So this tells us that during this benchmark, the GPU is sustaining roughly 13 teraflops of compute, which confirms that we're running a heavy, fully loaded GPU workload. Let's walk through what's actually happening to power during our GPU matrix multiplication experiment. We start at a wall, about 194 watts AC. After the power supply, that becomes roughly 183 watts of DC power entering the system. From there, the power splits into 3 main branches. The vast majority, about 180 watts, flows into what we call the package power PMIC. This block powers the entire compute package. The SoC and the LPDDR5X memory sitting right next to it. And it's worth noting this PMIC isn't perfectly efficient. About 5% of that input power is lost during voltage conversion before it even reaches the chips. Inside the package, around 155 watts goes into the SoC itself, including the GPU cores running our matmul kernel, but also caches, interconnect fabric, and memory controllers. Another 16 watts goes into DRAM, feeding the data that the GPU constantly streams in and out. The remaining power is tiny by comparison, less than a watt for USB and Thunderbolt because I did not have any peripherals attached, and about 2 watts for the fans. So, in this experiment, almost the entire system power is driven by the GPU workload. But crucially, it's not just compute. A significant portion is spent moving data through memory and across the chip. And that's exactly the energy that traditional GPU power models tend to hide. This highlighted region shows what in a traditional system would simply be called the GPU. Recall what mactop reported for our matrix multiplication workload, about 65 to 70 watts of GPU power. That sounds reasonable until you look at the full power flow. In reality, about 180 watts are flowing into this compute package, and during this workload almost all of that is driven by the GPU. So here's the key point. On a discrete GPU, like an NVIDIA card, all of this power would be reported as GPU power. The compute cores, the memory, the caches, the data movement, it's all part of the GPU's board power. But on Apple Silicon, only a fraction of that shows up as GPU power. The rest is effectively hidden in other components, even though it's clearly being driven by the GPU workload. So what looks like a 70-watt GPU is in reality much closer to a 180-watt GPU equivalent system. Now we run almost the exact same benchmark again, but this time on the CPU. The command looks nearly identical. The important difference is the array type. In the previous benchmark, we used metal array, so Julia dispatched the multiplication through metal and executed it on the GPU. Here, we use the original arrays, capital A, B, and C, which means malbang now calls the CPU-backed linear algebra implementation instead. So even though the math is the same, the execution path is completely different. Same matrix multiplication, same problem size, but now running on the CPU rather than the GPU. Pay attention to the idle power. It ranges between 6 and 7 watts. DRAM and CPU power are minimal, about half a watt combined according to mactop. Now observe the delta power when I run the kernel on the CPU. Reported CPU power peaks at 80 watts and system DC power at 123 to 124 watts, a 44 watt difference. If we shave off the idle baseline and DRAM, we are still left with roughly 36 watts unexplained power. A part of that residual is due to VRM losses and the PMIC feeding the SoC, so the total power attributable to the SoC comes out to about 110 watts. Yet again, the reported CPU power does not tell the full picture. I'll show you in a future video that this estimate actually comes very close to the real power flowing into the SoC when I do a deep dive in the SMC counters. You can observe now that the fan speed is ramping up and the CPU temperatures are well above 100 degrees Celsius. The reason why the CPU cores get so much hotter compared to the GPU cores is because they take up relatively much less area on chip. If you look at this die shot, the performance cores highlighted in yellow occupy only about 22% of the area of the GPU. If we use the measured execution time, in this case 6.8 seconds, and apply our old formula, we can compute the sustained CPU performance in gigaflops. It's expectedly far lower than the GPU. We can compare this value also to the theoretical maximum. We estimate that by taking the all-core frequency of 3.9 GHz multiplied by 12 cores times 4 neon vector units per core times 4 FP32 values per vector and times 2 for fuse multiply add. Finally, we run the exact same matrix multiplication again, but this time on the AMX units. All we do is import Apple Accelerate and run the same mulbang benchmark. What changes is not the code, but the implementation behind it. By importing Apple Accelerate, Julia's linear algebra bindings are redirected to Apple's Accelerate library. And on Apple Silicon, Accelerate uses the AMX units by default for matrix multiplication. So even though we're still calling mulbang on regular CPU arrays, the computation is no longer running on the standard CPU vector units. It's now being executed by the AMX matrix engines under the hood. Observe the CPU power and system DC power. We can see a near 5-fold difference now. This is the most profound relative difference we've observed so far. Clearly, the CPU power is now telling even less of the story, and a large part of the SoC power is not reported. The CPU cores stay much cooler now, as most of the work is done by the AMX engines themselves. Applying the same formula, we compute again the computational throughput. The performance is substantially higher now compared to the CPU cores. But the machine can do even faster. If you watch my deep dive on AMX, you will recall that the peak performance was achieved around n equal 1280. So let's reproduce that here. Looking at mactop, the CPU power is slightly higher, but DRAM is 3 times lower because the matrices fit into SRAM. The compute performance comes out close to 3.9 teraflops, which is comparable to what a 16-core Ryzen 9950X with quad AVX 512 pipelines can achieve, but at 4 to 5 times less power. The key takeaway from this analysis is that numbers reported for CPU and GPU power alone aren't giving us an accurate picture of power consumption on Apple Silicon. While it's useful, relying on it directly can lead to misleading conclusions. So instead, we established a more reliable methodology. First, we used mactop to capture total system DC power and then cross-check those readings with a wall-plug power meter to make sure the numbers are grounded in reality. From there, the most important step is isolating workloads. By running pure CPU or pure GPU tasks, we can clearly separate their contributions. We did this in Julia by running the same matrix multiplication kernels on 3 different devices available on Apple SoCs. We measure system power at idle, then again under a controlled workload, and take the difference between the two. That delta is what we attribute to the component we're stressing. The reason this works so well is that it cancels out the baseline noise of the system, things like display power, memory, background processes, and other always-on components. Those are present in both measurements, so when we subtract idle from load, they largely disappear. What's left is the incremental power directly tied to the workload. That makes delta power a much cleaner and more reliable signal than trying to interpret absolute readings, especially when tools like power metrics can misattribute or blur power across subsystems. In short, instead of asking how much power is the system using, we're asking how much extra power does this specific workload add, and that's a far more precise way to isolate CPU or GPU consumption. If we want to further refine the results, we can apply a conversion factor to account for VRM losses and subtract DRAM power. That gets us very close to actual SoC power. Taken together, this approach gives us a practical and repeatable way to cut through noisy measurements and get to the true power characteristics of the system. Now it's your turn. I want you to run this exact same experiment on your own machine. Measure the system DC power reported by mactop, switch between CPU, GPU and AMX and write down what you get. Then come back and post your results in the comments. Include your system information and the measured idle and load power for each mode, CPU, GPU, and AMX. I'm really curious to see how consistent these results are across different chips, because the more data we have, the clearer the picture becomes. And this time, we're not guessing, we are measuring.